of Ariston made her his wife. Now it chanced that Ariston fell in love with this person, and his love so preyed upon his mind that at last he devised as follows. He went to his friend, the lady's husband, and proposed to him that they should exchange gifts, each taking that which pleased him best out of all the possessions of the other. His friend, who felt no alarm about his wife, since Ariston was also married, consented readily, and so the matter was confirmed between them by an oath. Then Ariston gave Aegetus the present, whatever it was, of which he had made choice, and when it came to his turn to name the present which he was to receive in exchange, required to be allowed to carry home with him Aegetus's wife. But the other demurred and said, except his wife, he might have anything else. However, as he couldn't resist the oath which he had sworn, or the trickery which had been practised on him, at last he suffered Ariston to carry her away to his house. Ariston hereupon put away his second wife, and took for his third this woman, and she, in less than the due time, when she had not yet reached her full term of 10 months, gave birth to a child, the Demaratus of whom we have spoken. Then one of his servants came and told him the news, as he sat in council with the ephors, whereat, remembering when it was that the woman became his wife, he counted the months upon his fingers, and having so done, cried out with an oath, "The boy cannot be mine." This was said in the hearing of the ephors, but they made no account of it at the time. The boy grew up, and Ariston repented of what he had said, for he became altogether convinced that Demaratus was truly his son. The reason why he named him Demaratus was the following. Some time before these events, the whole Spartan people, looking upon Ariston as a man of mark beyond all the kings that had reigned at Sparta before him, had offered up a prayer that he might have a son. On this account, therefore, the name Demaratus was given. In the course of time, Ariston died, and Demaratus received the kingdom. But it was fated, as it seems, that these words, when bruited abroad, should strip him of his sovereignty. This was brought about by means of Kleomenis, whom he had twice sorely vexed, once when he led the army home from Eleusis, and a second time when Kleomenis was gone across to Aegina against such as had espoused the side of the Medes. Kleomenes now, being resolved to have his revenge upon Demaratus, went to Leotychides, the son of Menares and grandson of Agis, who was of the same family as Demaratus, and made agreement with him to this tenor following. Kleomenes was to lend his aid to make Leotychides king in the room of Demaratus, and then Leotychides was to take part with Kleomenes against the Aegianitans. Now Leotychides hated Demaratus, chiefly on account of Percolus, the daughter of Chilon, son of Demarminus. This lady had been betrothed to Leotychides, but Demaratus laid a plot and robbed him of his bride, forestalling him in carrying her off and marrying her. Such was the origin of the enmity. At the time of which we speak, Leotychides was prevailed upon by the earnest desire of Kleomenes to come forward against Demaratus and make oath that Demaratus was not rightful king of Sparta, since he was not the true son of Ariston. After he had thus sworn, Leotychides sued Demaratus, and brought up against him the phrase which Ariston had let drop, when, on the coming of his servant to announce to him the birth of his son, he counted the months and cried out with an oath that the child was not his. It was on this speech of Ariston's that Leotychides relied to prove that Demaratus was not his son, and therefore not rightful king of Sparta, and he produced as witnesses the ephors who were sitting with Ariston at the time and heard what he said. At last, as there came to be much strife concerning this matter, the Spartans made a decree that the Delphic Oracle should be asked to say whether Demaratus were Ariston's son or no. Kleomenes set them upon this plan, and no sooner was the decree passed Then he made a friend of Cobon, the son of Aristophanes, a man of the greatest weight among the Delphians. And this Cobon prevailed upon Periala, the prophetess, to give the answer which Kleomenes wished. Accordingly, when the sacred messengers came and put their question, the Pythoness returned for answer that Demaratus was not Aristone's son. Some time afterwards all this became known, and Cobon was forced to fly from Delphi, while Periala the prophetess was deprived of her office. Such were the means whereby the deposition of Demaratus was brought about. But his flying from Sparta to the Medes was by reason of an affront which was put upon him. On losing his kingdom, he had been made a magistrate, and in that office soon afterwards, when the feast of the Gymnopaidiae came round, he took his station among the lookers-on. Whereupon Leotychides, who was now king in his room, sent a servant to him and asked him by way of insult and mockery how it felt to be a magistrate after one had been a king. Demaratus, who was hurt at the question, made answer, "Tell him I have tried them both, but he has not. Howbeit this speech will be the cause to Sparta of infinite blessings, or else of infinite woes." Having thus spoken, he wrapped his head in his robe, and leaving the theatre, went home to his own house, where he prepared an ox for sacrifice, and offered it to Zeus, after which he called for his mother. When she appeared, he took of the entrails, and placing them in her hand, besought her in these words following: "Dear mother, I beseech you by all the gods, and chiefly by our own hearth-god Zeus, tell me the very truth, who was really my father? For Leotychides, in the suit which we had together, declared that when thou becamest Aristone's wife, thou didst already bear in thy womb a child by thy former husband. And others repeat a yet more disgraceful tale, that our groom found favour in thine eyes, and that I am his son. I entreat thee therefore by the gods to tell me the truth, for if thou hast gone astray, thou hast done no more than many a woman, and the Spartans remark it as strange, if I am Aristone's son, that he had no children by his other wives." Thus spake Demaratus, and his mother replied as follows: "Dear son, since thou entreatest so earnestly for the truth, it shall indeed be fully told to thee. When Aristone brought me to his house, on the third night after my coming, there appeared to me one like to Aristone, who after staying with me a while rose, and taking the garlands from his own brows, placed them upon my head, and so went away. Presently, after Aristone entered, and when he saw the garlands which I still wore, asked me who gave them to me. I said 'twas he, but this he stoutly denied. Whereupon I solemnly swore that it was none other, and told him he didn't do well to dissemble when he had so lately risen from my side and left the garlands with me. Then Aristone, when he heard my oath, understood that there was something beyond nature in what had taken place, and indeed it appeared that the garlands had come from the Hero temple which stands by our court gates, the temple of him they call Astrobacchus. And the soothsayers, moreover, declared that the apparition was that very person. And now, my son, I've told thee all thou wouldest fain know. Either thou art the son of that hero, either thou mayst call Astrobacchus sire, or else Aristone was thy father. As for that matter which they who hate thee urge the most, the words of Aristone, who, when the messenger told him of thy birth, declared before many witnesses that thou wert not his son, forasmuch as the 10 months were not fully out, it was a random speech, uttered from mere ignorance. The truth is, children are born not only at 10 months, but at 9, and even at 7. Thou wert thyself, my son, a 7 months child. Aristone acknowledged no long time afterwards that his speech sprang from thoughtlessness. Hearken not then to other tales concerning thy birth, my son, for be assured thou hast the whole truth. As for grooms, pray heaven Leotychides and all who speak as he does may suffer wrong from them." Such was the mother's answer. Demaratus, having learnt all that he wished to know, took with him provision for the journey and went into Elis, pretending that he purposed to proceed to Delphi and there consult the oracle. The Lacedaemonians, however, suspecting that he meant to fly his country, sent men in pursuit of him. But Demaratus hastened, and, leaving Elis before they arrived, sailed across to Zacynthus. The Lacedaemonians followed, and sought to lay hands upon him and to separate him from his retinue. But the Zacynthans wouldn't give him up to them, so he, escaping, made his way afterwards by sea to Asia, and presented himself before King Darius, who received him generously, and gave him both lands and cities. Such was the chance which drove Demaratus to Asia, a man distinguished among the Lacedaemonians for many noble deeds and wise counsels, and who alone of all the Spartan kings brought honour to his country by winning at Olympia the prize in the 4-horse chariot race. After Demaratus was deposed, Leotychides, the son of Menares, received the kingdom. He had a son, Zeuxidamus, called Siniscus by many of the Spartans. This Zeuxidamus didn't reign at Sparta, but died before his father, leaving a son, Archidamus. Leotychides, when Zeuxidamus was taken from him, married a second wife, named Eurydame, the sister of Menneus and daughter of Diotocrates. By her he had no male offspring, but only a daughter called Lampito, whom he gave in marriage to Archidamus, Zeuxidamus' son. Even Leotychides, however, didn't spend his old age in Sparta, but suffered a punishment whereby Demaratus was fully avenged. He commanded the Lacedaemonians when they made war against Thessaly, and might have conquered the whole of it, but was bribed by a large sum of money. It chanced that he was caught in the fact, being found sitting in his tent on a gauntlet quite full of silver. Upon this he was brought to trial and banished from Sparta. His house was razed to the ground, and he himself fled to Tegea, where he ended his days. But these events took place long afterwards. At the time of which we're speaking, Kleomenes, having carried his proceedings in the matter of Demaratus to a prosperous issue, forthwith took Leotychides with him and crossed over to attack the Aeginetans. For his anger was hot against them on account of the affront which they had formerly put upon him. Hereupon the Aeginetans, seeing that both the kings were come against them, thought it best to make no further resistance. So the two kings picked out from all Aegina the 10 men who for wealth and birth stood the highest, among whom were Creus, son of Polycrates, and Casambus, son of Aristocrates, who wielded the chief power. And these men they carried with them to Attica, and there deposited them in the hands of the Athenians, the great enemies of the Aeginetans. Afterwards, when it came to be known what evil arts had been used against Demaratus, Kleomenes was seized with fear of his own countrymen, and fled into Thessaly. From thence he passed into Arcadia, where he began to stir up troubles, and endeavoured to unite the Arcadians against Sparta. He bound them by various oaths to follow him whithersoever he should lead, and was even desirous of taking their chief leaders with him to the city of Nonacris, that he might swear them to his cause by the waters of the Styx. For the waters of Styx, as the Arcadians say, are in that city, and this is the appearance they present. You see a little water dripping from a rock into a basin, which is fenced round by a low wall. Nonacris, where this fountain is to be seen, is a city of Arcadia, near Phoenius. When the Lacedaemonians heard how Kleomenes was engaged, they were afraid, and agreed with him that he should come back to Sparta and be king as before. So Kleomenes came back, but had no sooner returned than he, who had never been altogether of sound mind, was smitten with downright madness. This he showed by striking every Spartan he met upon the face with his sceptre. On his behaving thus, and showing that he was gone quite out of his mind, his kindred imprisoned him, and even put his feet in the stocks. while so bound. Kleomenes, having arrived upon the banks of this river, proceeded to offer sacrifice to it, but in spite of all that he could do, the victims weren't favourable to his crossing. So he said that he admired the god for refusing to betray his countrymen, but still the Argives shouldn't escape him for all that. He then withdrew his troops and led them down to Thyrea, where he sacrificed a bull to the sea, and conveyed his men on shipboard to Nauplia in the Tyrinthian territory. The Argives, when they heard of this, marched down to the sea to defend their country, and arriving in the neighbourhood of Tiryns, at the place which bears the name of Sepaia, they pitched their camp opposite to the Lacedaemonians, leaving no great space between the hosts. And now their fear wasn't so much lest they should be worsted in open fight, as lest some trick should be practised on them, for such was the danger which the oracle given to them in common with the Milesians seemed to intimate. The oracle ran as follows: "Time shall be when the female shall conquer the male, and shall chase him far away, gaining so great praise and honour in Argos. Then full many an Argive woman her cheeks shall mangle. Hence in the times to come 'twill be said by the men who are unborn, tamed by the spear, expired the coiled terrible serpent." At the coincidence of all these things, the Argives were greatly cast down, and so they resolved that they would follow the signals of the enemy's herald. Having made this resolve, they proceeded to act as follows. Whenever the herald of the Lacedaemonians gave any order to the soldiers of his own army, the Argives did the like on their side. Now when Kleomenes heard that the Argives were acting thus, he commanded his troops that so soon as the herald gave the word for the soldiers to go to dinner, they should instantly seize their arms and charge the host of the enemy, which the Lacedaemonians did accordingly, and fell upon the Argives just as, following the signal, they had begun their repast. Whereby it came to pass that vast numbers of the Argives were slain, while the rest, who were more than they which died in the fight, were driven to take refuge in the grove of Argus hard by, where they were surrounded, and watch kept upon them. When things were at this pass, Kleomenes acted as follows. Having learnt the names of the Argives who were shut up in the sacred precinct from certain deserters who had come over to him, he sent a herald to summon them one by one on pretence of having received their ransoms. Now the ransom of prisoners among the Peloponnesians is fixed at 2 many the man. So Kleomenes had these persons called forth severally to the number of 50 or thereabouts, and massacred them. All this while they who remained in the enclosure knew nothing of what was happening, for the grove was so thick that the people inside were unable to see what was taking place without. But at last one of their number climbed up into a tree and spied the treachery, after which none of those who were summoned would go forth. Then Kleomenes ordered all the helots to bring brushwood and heap it around the grove, which was done accordingly. And Kleomenes set the grove on fire. As the flames spread, he asked a deserter, "Who was the god of the grove?" Whereto the other made answer, "Argus." So he, when he heard that, uttered a loud groan, and said, "Greatly hast thou deceived me, Apollo, god of prophecy, in saying that I should take Argos. I fear me thy oracle has now got its accomplishment." Kleomenes now sent home the greater part of his army, while with 1,000 of his best troops he proceeded to the temple of Hera to offer sacrifice. When, however, he would have slain the victim on the altar himself, the priest forbade him, as it wasn't lawful, he said, for a foreigner to sacrifice in that temple. At this, Kleomenes ordered his helots to drag the priest from the altar and scourge him, while he performed the sacrifice himself, after which he went back to Sparta. Thereupon his enemies brought him up before the ephors, and made it a charge against him that he had allowed himself to be bribed, and on that account had not taken Argos, when he might have captured it easily. To this he answered, whether truly or falsely I can't say with certainty, but at any rate his answer to the charge was that so soon as he discovered the sacred precinct which he had taken to belong to Argus, he directly imagined that the oracle had received its accomplishment. He therefore thought it not good to attempt the town, at least until he had inquired by sacrifice and ascertained if the god meant to grant him the place, or was determined to oppose his taking it. So he offered in the temple of Hera, and when the omens were propitious, immediately there flashed forth a flame of fire from the breast of the image, whereby he knew of a surety that he was not to take Argus. For if the flash had come from the head, he would have gained the town, citadel and all, but as it shone from the breast, he had done so much as the god intended. And his words seemed to the Spartans so true and reasonable that he came clear off from his adversaries. Argos, however, was left so bare of men that the slaves managed the state, filled the offices, and administered everything until the sons of those who were slain by Kleomenes grew up. Then these latter cast out the slaves and got the city back under their own rule, while the slaves, who had been driven out, fought a battle and won Tiryns. After this, for a time, there was peace between the two. But a certain man, a soothsayer, named Cleander, who was by race a Phigalian from Arcadia, joined himself to the slaves and stirred them up to make a fresh attack upon their lords. Then were they at war with one another by the space of many years. But at length the Argives with much trouble gained the upper hand. The Argives say that Kleomenes lost his senses and died so miserably on account of these doings. But his own countrymen declare that his madness proceeded not from any supernatural cause whatever, but only from the habit of drinking wine unmixed with water, which he learned of the Scyths. These nomads, from the time that Darius made his inroad into their country, had always had a wish for revenge. They therefore sent ambassadors to Sparta to conclude a league, proposing to endeavour themselves to enter Media by the Phasis, while the Spartans should march inland from Ephesus, and then the two armies should join together in one. When the Scyths came to Sparta on this errand, Kleomenes was with them continually, and growing somewhat too familiar, learnt of them to drink his wine without water, a practice which is thought by the Spartans to have caused his madness. From this distance of time, the Spartans, according to their own account, have been accustomed, when they want to drink purer wine than common, to give the order to fill Scythian fashion. The Spartans then speak thus concerning Kleomenes, but for my own part I think his death was a judgment on him for wronging Demaratus. No sooner did the news of Kleomenes' death reach Aegina than straightway the Aeginetans sent ambassadors to Sparta to complain of the conduct of Leotychides in respect of their hostages who were still kept at Athens. So they of Lacedaemon assembled a court of justice and gave sentence upon Leotychides, that whereas he had grossly affronted the people of Aegina, he should be given up to the ambassadors to be led away in place of the men whom the Athenians had in their keeping. Then the ambassadors were about to lead him away, but Theacides, the son of Leoprepes, who was a man greatly esteemed in Sparta, interfered and said to them, "What are ye minded to do, ye men of Aegina, to lead away captive the king of the Spartans, whom his countrymen have given into your hands? Though now in their anger they have passed this sentence, yet belike the time will come when they will punish you if you act thus, by bringing utter destruction upon your country." The Aeginetans, when they heard this, changed their plan, and instead of leading Leotychides away captive, agreed with him that he should come with them to Athens and give them back their men. When, however, he reached that city and demanded the restoration of his pledge, the Athenians, being unwilling to comply, proceeded to make excuses, saying that two kings had come and left the men with them, and they didn't think it right to give them back to the one without the other. So when the Athenians refused plainly to restore the men, Leotychides said to them, "Men of Athens, act which way you choose, give me up the hostages and be righteous, or keep them and be the contrary. I wish, however, to tell you what happened once in Sparta about a pledge. The story goes among us that 3 generations back there lived in Lacedaemon one Glaucus, the son of Epicades, a man who in every other respect was on a par with the first in the kingdom, and whose character for justice was such as to place him above all the other Spartans. Now to this man at the appointed season the following events happened. A certain Milesian came to Sparta, and having desired to speak with him, said, I am of Miletus, and I have come hither, Glaucus, in the hope of profiting by thy honesty. For when I heard much talk thereof in Ionia, and through all the rest of Greece, and when I observed that whereas Ionia is always insecure, the Peloponnese stands firm and unshaken, and noted likewise how wealth is continually changing hands in our country, I took counsel with myself, and resolved to turn 1/2 of my substance into money, and place it in thy hands, since I'm well assured that it will be safe in thy keeping. Here then is the silver. Take it, and take likewise these tallies, and be careful of them. Remember thou art to give back the money to the person who shall bring you their fellows. Such were the words of the Milesian stranger, and Glaucus took the deposit on the terms expressed to him. Many years had gone by, when the sons of the man by whom the money was left came to Sparta and had an interview with Glaucus, whereat they produced the tallies, and asked to have the money returned to them. But Glaucus sought to refuse, and answered them, I have no recollection of the matter, nor can I bring to mind any of those particulars whereof ye speak. When I remember, I will certainly do what is just. If I had the money, you have a right to receive it back, but if it was never given to me, I shall put the Greek law in force against you. For the present I give you no answer, but 4 months hence I will settle the business. So the Milesians went away sorrowful, considering that their money was utterly lost to them. As for Glaucus, he made a journey to Delphi, and there consulted the oracle. To his question if he should swear, and so make prize of the money, the Pythoness returned for answer these lines following. Best for the present it were, O Glaucus, to do as thou wishest, swearing an oath to prevail, and so to make prize of the money. Swear then, death is the lot e'en of those who never swear falsely, yet hath the oath god a son who is nameless, footless, and handless. Mighty in strength he approaches to vengeance, and whelms in destruction all who belong to the race or the house of the man who is perjured. But oath-keeping men leave behind them a flourishing offspring. Glaucus, when he heard these words, earnestly besought the god to pardon his question, but the Pythoness replied that it was as bad to have tempted the god as it would have been to have done the deed. Glaucus, however, sent for the Milesian strangers and gave them back their money. And now I will tell you, Athenians, what my purpose has been in recounting to you this history. Glaucus at the present time has not a single descendant, nor is there any family known as his. Root and branch has he been removed from Sparta. It's a good thing, therefore, when a pledge has been left with one, not even in thought to doubt about restoring it. Thus spake Leotychides, but as he found that the Athenians would not hearken to him, he left them and went his way. The Aeginetans had never been punished for the wrongs which to pleasure the Thebans they had committed upon Athens. Now, however, conceiving that they were themselves wronged, and had a fair ground of complaint against the Athenians, they instantly prepared to revenge themselves. As it chanced that the Athenian Theoris, which was a vessel of 5 banks of oars, lay at Sunium, the Aeginetans contrived an ambush, and made themselves masters of the holy vessel, on board of which were a number of Athenians of the highest rank, whom they took and threw into prison. At this outrage the Athenians no longer delayed, but set to work to scheme their worst against the Aeginetans. And as there was in Aegina at that time a man of mark, Nicodremus by name, the son of Cnoethus, who was on ill terms with his countrymen, because on a former occasion they had driven him into banishment, They listened to overtures from this man, who had heard how determined they were to do the Aeginetans a mischief, and agreed with him that on a certain day he should be ready to betray the island into their hands, and they would come with a body of troops to his assistance. And Nicodemus, some time after, holding to the agreement, made himself master of what is called the Old Town. The Athenians, however, didn't come to the